Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Yeshama shir chadash.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome home to Torah. Warm welcome back to the what do I call this? What we are? We're in Eretz Chemda. I usually tell them we're all in the Yiboneh Beit Midrash, and we are not. We are on not vacation. We're on location. How's that? So, as you know, who watch regularly, that we usually use the Yakar as the basis for our discussion. And I want you to know how fundamental his ideas are. And this tonight will not disappoint you. What we will be dealing with are the absolute fundamentals in a big way. But I want to remind you, we're only going to deal with like one part of a verse. So to get like a better picture of the Parsha, I recommend highly, number one, to go down below into the description box and see the other shirim that we gave on this Parsha, and they're all listed. I went out of my way and I put them all neatly together for you. That's number one. Number two, there's also a link to find the Hebrew sheets. We really encourage you to learn Hebrew. You'll get a black and white copy. You won't get a pretty colored copy that I have here that I use for my dull mind to help myself stay awake and on point. So we're in chapter 14 of Exodus, and we're on verse 16. Now, as a brief introduction, what I want to share with you, I said it's 13 verse 16. So what's happening? I'm in the wrong, it's 14, sorry. Chapter 14, verse 16. And I want to give this overview, like an introduction to an idea that will lay the groundwork to what we're about to see. In verse, if you look in the English source sheets, for example, it says in our verse, chapter 14, verse 16, that's one on the source sheet, that Moses is told to raise his staff and then stretch out his hand. Later on, by the unfortunate hitting of the rock, we call Memariva, where there was a shortage of water, so to speak. So it says, look in number 6. It's Numbers chapter 20, and it's 8 through 13. It says, you know what I'm going to have to do? I have to explain something before we go further. In our verse, where we just saw, that it says you should raise your staff. What the Yakar is going to do is take that word, harem et matcha, to raise your staff, and he's going to use Onkelos' explanation and the Medrash's explanation. That it doesn't mean to raise your staff, it means to remove your staff, get rid of your staff, and stretch out your hand instead. Forget the staff. I want your hands. When we go into Bamidbar, chapter 20, verses 8 through 13, that's number 6 on the source sheet. Yes, it's true, God said, Moses, take your staff. And in 9, Moses actually takes his staff. But what did God tell him to do? He didn't tell him to hit the rock. But what did Moses do? It says he raised his hand and struck the rock. If the word raised, it really means to remove, he let it go. He didn't use his hand. But what he did was he struck the rock with his staff. The complete opposite of what's going on here. God wants him to remove his staff and use his hand. In other words, okay, that's like the groundwork. Now, another important point. In our Parsha, in our verse, so it says at the end of, we're in chapter 14. Let's just go one verse later. No? Let's go to chapter 14, verse 31. Because Moses actually did what God said, which was release the staff and use the hand, he caused Israel to believe in the Lord. See the verse? And Israel saw, chapter 14, verse 31. Israel saw the what? The great hand. And they believed in the Lord. When we go back to Numbers, it's what happened. He hit the rock. He's no longer allowed to go into Israel. And what was the cause? What did it say in verse 12? Since you did not have faith in me to sanctify me in the eyes of Israel. In other words, he didn't cause them, the Jewish people, to believe in God the same way he did in our chapter, where he releases the stick and uses his hand. In Numbers, he releases his hand and uses the stick. Okay, you don't have to believe me. Let's just see what the Yakar has to say, and we'll begin with the words. The atah harem es modcha. It's like a command form. God says, you shall, and we're going to use raised for the moment. Harem, literally pshat, is to raise your staff. Untei, and to spread out es yodcha al hayam, and to spread out your hand over the sea. There's a famous medrash, and I want you to look at it. It's number 2 on the source sheet, and it really starts where I have the 5 dots down, like 4 or 5 lines down below, but it's based on raise your staff, okay? Raise your staff. So Rabbi Shimon said, this is analogous, similar to a story of a holder of a rod of office. So for example, you have, a mayor of a town, and he walks through like a parade, and he has a certain, the city flag or the key of the city on a pole, some kind of symbol of authority, this staff, who was walking outside with his rod in his hand. They said, whoever they are, if it wasn't for this rod that this person has in his hand, he wouldn't be well respected. It could be the status symbol, it could be the status itself, or the person, but somehow or another, if that rod was not in his hand, he wouldn't have been afforded as much respect. The king, who obviously gave this person the authority and therefore the stick, heard, and he said, to this person, I want you to put down that rod, go outside, and anyone who doesn't greet you with respect, I will remove his head. So that's the analogy. Let's go back into, this is the Medrash. The Medrash says this is exactly by the Egyptians. And I'm going to put together maybe the Erev Rav or anybody else who was not a real believer. The Egyptians said that Moses would have been unable to do anything but for the staff. Why? Because all the makot, all of the miracles and different things that were happening in Egypt seemed allegedly to happen due to this staff. So the inferior ones looking on say, oh, it's like, the magic wand. It's the magic in the wand, not in the, not the person. We were talking about the miracles in Egypt. So when Israel came, if Moses would have been unable to do anything but for the staff, with it he struck the Nile. With it he brought all the plagues. So that's what they would say. So what happens when Israel comes into the midst of the sea and the Egyptians were standing behind them, right, in a hard place, stuck behind? The Holy One Blood said to Moses, cast away your staff. Remember we said the word harem means to dispose of, to remove. So they will not say, in other words, so Moses, get rid of the staff at this moment. We're about to split the sea. Get rid of the staff. Were it not for the staff, so they will not say, were it not for the staff, he wouldn't have been able to split the sea. Therefore it says, raise your staff. Not raise your staff, but get rid of your staff. I know this is very confusing because Parshat was, and we all saw the movie, and we can't get the pictures out of our head of Charlton Heston standing there with his arms spread out, holding the staff. But the way the Yakar, and he brings, if you look at Rashi says, Onkelos says the word harem means to dispose of, to remove. So the Yakar is not making this up. Number one, he's sitting on Rashi, who's sitting on the Mechilta. And it's the Medrash itself we just read. Harem means to get rid of. And that's pshat. We'll see how this develops. Okay. So now we're back into the Yakar itself. We're on the first line. B'midrash, as I just read to you in English, Amru. Lefi shayu oimrim ha-mitzrim, since the Egyptians would say, Lulei ha-mateh, if it were not for the mateh is the rod, the staff, Lo hayachol asot et kol hanisim. The Egyptians, and I think it means anybody who's inferior, they would just simply say, if it wasn't for the staff, he couldn't have done, right? You need the magic wand. You need the formula. You have to say, right, hocus pocus or abracadabra, or it ain't going to happen. By the way, abara kedabra, it's actually Aramaic/Hebrew, which means abracadabra, abara, I will create, future tense, kedabra, as I speak. Okay, so that's interesting. We all grew up, I don't know if we all did, but I grew up with that vision of a magician somehow hocus pocus saying these words as if it's something in the words. Okay, so let's go back. So had it not been for the staff, Moses certainly would not have been able to do any of these miracles. That's why God says at the sea, Salek et motcha. Remember, this is the measure. Get rid of, remove, release your staff. Unatei es yodcha, and spread out your hands. Why? Ki harem, the word harem, which is in our verse, which we thought means to raise, is a lashon of siluku, right? Remove. And this is on Rosh Hashanah, when we use the beats or whatever, we say that the God should remove our enemies. Bezrat Hashem, what we said on Rosh Hashanah should come true this year. Okay, so the Yakar continues. I'm actually going to give you some really good reasons for this idea. And he starts by asking a question. Lama dafka b'kriyat yamsuf. Why is it specifically at the splitting of the sea? Tziva hakadosh baruch hu lahasir hamateh. That God commands, that God wants that Moses should get rid of the staff at this moment. Lefi sharatza kadosh baruch hu, because what does God want? God wants sheyasem Moshe lamata. I know it's spelled the same as lamateh. You know it's different vowels. Lamata is down, lamala is up. God wanted that Moses should do lamata adugma. Lamata means down in this earthly physical sphere that we're in, adugma, as to emulate, to reflect, to mimic or simulate el kol davar hanasa lamala, whatever is happening above. Keep in mind, this is an amazing concept. Okay, we are a hologram. We are a reflection of what's really going on in the upper worlds. We spoke about all wars are actually fought in heaven, and later we just have to show up. Okay, so Moses is reflecting like a mirror, mirroring of what's going on above. So God wants his great hand to be known. Get rid of the stick. I want your hand spread out. I want you to reflect or to mimic what's going on above in heaven. Hine, kol hamakot hayu be'etzba Elokim. We already know, we saw the verse where the Egyptians themselves said that all of these makot, all of the plagues, it's in number 3, Exodus 8:15. The necromancer said to Pharaoh, it's the finger of God. Now I'm holding up a finger for a reason. A finger, the Yakar is going to say, represents the staff. It's only one finger. It's a small picture, as opposed to a great hand, a whole hand. Okay, so listen to what the Yakar now says. That kol hamakot, all of the plagues, hayu were be'etzba Elokim, with the finger of God. Al kena'asu gam lamata Al Yidei Mate Moshe. I wonder if there's like a significance between the word mate and mata. Same letters, same root, but we'll talk about it another time. Meditate on it. Therefore, God made also lamata below, al yidei mate Moshe, through the rod or staff of Moshe. Ki mate dome le'etzba. since a rod or a staff is similar to a finger. Aval al hayam, but when it came to the splitting of the sea, the splitting and the crossing over, laku bekol hayat, they were smitten with the entire hand. Shneimar, as it says in verse 31, 1431, right? I'll just read it again. Israel saw the great hand which the Lord had used upon the Egyptians. The people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in Moses his servant. Right? V'yar Yisrael es hayad hagadolah, the great hand, asher also Hashem b'Mitzrayim, which Hashem performed in Egypt. V'yiru'u ha'am, the people feared et Hashem. And this is the important part. V'aminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe avdo. Right? We say these words every morning in the Pesukah B'Zimra. Okay. So the Yakar continues. Al Kain, therefore, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe. What was God saying to Moses? Shiaseh gam lamata dugma lezeh. Therefore, I want you to recreate this idea of what's happening above, but I want you to do it below, which is v'silek et hamate, get rid of, release your rod, doime le'etzba, that is similar to just a finger. V'unate es yodcha, and to spread your hand. Al hayad, kol hayad, the entire hand. Spread your entire hand. Dugma yad hazaka he'elyona yitbarach, which would be a dugma. Again, dugma would be to reflect, to emulate. I'm going to use the word corresponds to the great, heavenly, strong hand of God. Therefore, it says, L'chach amar, that's why it says in verse 31, right? V'yar Yisrael et yad hagadolah, that Israel saw the great hand. Now, agav zeh means as a result of this. Ra'u means to see, but here see means to understand, right? To comprehend. So through this, as a result, the Jewish people understood. It could even be those Egyptians who made this wrong idea. Ki shelo bekoach hamateh asa Moshe et kol hamaseh gadol v'norah hazeh. They understood through this, as a result, that it was not the power of the rod. It had nothing, there was nothing intrinsic in the staff itself that was creating these, and I don't want to use magic, but the miracles that Moses used or did for all of the actions, and it's not just any action, Hamaseh Hagadol, V'hanorah Hazeh, the great and awesome feat that he accomplished. Shaharei Hutrach Lintot Yad Dugma Tayan Chazaka Shalamala. Therefore, God found it necessary. He wanted that he should spread his hands as an example of the strong hand of God above. Al Kain, therefore, what's the result? V'aminu b'Hashem u'Moshe avdo. Like in verse 31, the result would be that they would believe in God and in Moshe his servant. And as a result of releasing the rod and using the full hand motion, so to speak, ki chazru midivreihem, remember we said this is what the Egyptians would say, or anybody who's inferior, they would retract. Chazru midivreihem. They would retract their words. Sha'amru, that they had said before. L'sha'avar shebekoach hamateh, that it was on account of the staff. Poel kozeh, that everything happened. No, they believed in Hashem. It has nothing to do with magic of a staff. Umikan, when it says kan, we're talking about our verse. Tavin ve'emet. You will actually learn and understand the truth. Ma haya cheto shel Moshe b'mei meriva. What exactly was the sin of Moshe at the hitting of the rock episode? Kisham ne'emar, mamash hefech memash ne'emar kan. That it's, I'm going to say seemingly allegedly, because as long as it's raised and not get rid of, it doesn't seem opposite. But if it's to get rid of, he's claiming that what is said over there is completely opposite of what is basically being mentioned here. Why? Ki kan ne'emar, here it says haremes matcha, as we've reiterated several times, release the staff, hainu, Salek et motcha. Mamish, release it from your hand. Don't hold it in your hand. Unatei es yodcha, but rather spread your hand. Not spread or do anything with the staff, but your hand. V'ayidei zeh ba'uli de amuna. And as we said in the introduction, this would bring you to amuna, to a level of faith that would be unshakable. But over in Mei Merivah, in Numbers chapter 20, verse 11, it says, even after he was told, yes, take the staff, and he says he took the staff, but it doesn't say anything about hitting the rock. There's no hitting the rock, but he hit the rock. So over there it says, V'yarim es yado v'yek b'mateyu. He actually released his hand, whatever his hand's supposed to represent, but he hit the rock with his staff, which is not what he was supposed to do. V'silek es yado. He removed his hand. He released his hand. It wasn't involved. Kilo osa ha'pu'ula biyodo. He didn't do the action with his hand. He did it with the stick. Ki'im b'mateyu, but rather with his staff. Al kein hachzir dvarim rishonim sha'amru shebekoch hamate pa'al hakol limekomam. So even though we said that the Egyptians themselves had the false idea in the beginning, and Moses did what God told him, release your staff, and everyone should have the right idea. At this point, and I say Egyptians, I think it's really talking about the Erev Rav and everyone else who is the inferior. This retroactively, I don't even retroactively, but it basically put the words back in the original place, the mistaken place, that it's all due to the staff. Because water eventually did come out after he hit it twice. Okay? So that's what it says here. Ubezeg garam miyut amuna. The opposite effect of what we had by the sea. Miyut means minimized, diminished. This caused less amuna, as opposed to that you caused them to believe in me by the sea. Here, you didn't cause them to believe in me. In fact, less, because they would believe in the stick. Just like it says over in Bamidbar, it says, Ya'an lo hamantem bi, right? Which basically means, since you did not have faith in me, but in other words, you didn't have faith in me, you didn't bring them to a stronger faith in me either. Now, what I want to say in conclusion, and this may sound incredibly far out, maybe not, maybe it's familiar. When Moses prays because he wants to come into the land, it's immediately after a war with Sichon and Og. The Yakar makes an amazing statement. We don't see that Moses made the sun stand still, but we see Joshua did. The Yakar says, why did Moses think he can get into the land now? Because he thinks he rectified what happened at Mei Merivah, because he didn't cause them to believe in me, so that's why he can't lead them into the land of Israel. He diminished. But Moses himself thought, after that war, and I'm going to tell you this fantastic idea, that he now rectified that. And what was the rectification? If he caused them not to believe in God, so that's the negative. The Yakar says, it's impossible for the student to make the sun stand still without the Rebbe doing the same. And there's enough hint in the verses, and there's Medrash and everything else that actually says that Moses did make the sun stand still during that war. It's just not recorded in the Bible. But Joshua, it is recorded. It's not logical that Joshua is able to make the sun stand still without Moses. It's like, I don't know if it's disgraceful to the Rebbe, right? The Rebbe is supposed to be greater than the student. So if the student can do it, certainly the Rebbe can do it. You follow my logic. It's not my logic, it's the Yakar's. So what was Moses' sin that he was not able to bring the Jews in? This is what the Yakar here is saying. It was the fact that he raised his stick and not the hand, because raising the hand would have somehow symbolized God's great hand. And, okay, I'm going to say further. So what did Moses do when he stopped the sun? He actually did not consult God. He did what he should have done at the Mei Merivah. What happened at Mei Merivah? There's complaint, there's no water. So what should I do? So, okay, then he tells him to speak to the rock. Instead, he hits the rock. The sin was, for a prophet like Moses, that he actually didn't just, oh, you need water? No problem. Water come out of the rock. Instead, he didn't know what to do. That's not a leader. I'm not, again, this is not my idea. I would never say this about Moshe, but everyone will basically say, I shouldn't say everybody, but most will say, Moses was basically disqualified himself from leading the Jewish people into the land of Israel due to the hitting of the rock. He just wasn't fit for that type of leadership. So according to the Yakar, what he should have done was just demand. It's called a tzaddik can command a blessing. Oh, you need health? You are healed. You shall be healed. Oh, you need water? You need parnasa? So there is this, koach, power of a blessing, or commanding a blessing, commanding a miracle by a tzaddik. And Moses should have realized that, number one. When he made the sun stand still, he didn't consult God. He actually did rectify. But for some other reason, God felt, right? That's where we're left. We don't know exactly why Moses didn't come in, because if he did rectify by saying, oh, we need to finish this war, and I'm making the sun stand still, and of course we know that because Joshua did it. So he did it then, and knowing that he did what he did to make the sun stand still was a rectification, i.e. that he didn't consult and he didn't violate the word. He just commanded a blessing, like he should have just said to the rock, bring forth water. So anyway, we should get a lot of chizuk from knowing what a tzaddik could do, the power of a tzaddik in this world. We should hopefully, learn and work on our character, whatever is involved in becoming a tzaddik, or let's just say better than we are from yesterday. We have today, it's all we have. We can work little by little in that direction, and B'ezrat Hashem, not only will you be able to command blessings for others, I have no doubt that the blessings will come to you. And with that, I wish everyone a great Shabbat Shalom, a great life, and we'll see you B'ezrat Hashem next week.
Yiboneh, Yiboneh.